This is a short presentation about the evaluation genre. In the evaluation, the writer takes up something. We often think of evaluations as focusing on performances, although this term can be very broadly defined. So the genre takes up a performance and measures that performance against a set of standards or criteria in order to arrive at a reasoned and justifiable judgment about the performance. Some kinds of performances that are often evaluated, we often use another term synonymously, the review. So some kinds of performances that are often reviewed or evaluated include individual job performance, fulfillment of the criteria of an assignment or a project, arts performances, the performance of various products, and so on. I want to look with you at the basic genre features of evaluations or reviews, offer some opportunities to think about what circumstances call for evaluations, and finally, I want to look with you at the opportunities for writing an evaluation in the rhetorical situations that surround your topic and the fitting responses that the opportunity to compose an evaluation might suggest. Richard Coe, Lorelei Lingard, and Tatiana Teslenko write in the introduction to their book, The Rhetoric and Ideology of Genres, a set of criteria for thinking about any genre. So they ask, what sorts of communication does the genre encourage and what sorts does it discourage? Who can and cannot use the genre? Does it empower some people and silence others? Does it work in all contexts, or are the effects of this genre not useful in another context? What values and beliefs are embodied in the genre? And then finally, what political or ethical implications are in the genre, i.e., in the situation that the genre constructs or takes part in, the persona of the participants and the audience who's invoked, and so forth. Other writers who focus on genre also provide similar lists. For example, in the Norton Field Guide to Writing, the criteria for analyzing genres suggests looking at the rhetorical features of various genres, the organizational or compositional strategies typical of the genre, and so on. Amy Devitt asks the writer to consider where and in what recurring scenarios does the genre typically appear, and for what purposes is the genre used. So what are the typical scenes in which evaluations occur? This question doesn't necessarily have a simple answer. The answers also might shift and change over time, and they might depend also on what kind of evaluation is being written. So let's take a car, for instance, a brand new car made in the USA, a 1960 Chevrolet Corvair. Now, for the purposes of this anecdote, you have to be of car buying age in 1960. I hope that's not a problem. The car is released. It's sporty and fun to drive. It turns out that the 1960 Corvair is the car of the year for Motor Trend magazine. Motor Trend magazine uses a variety and a battery of performance tests to evaluate any car that it designates worthy of the honor of being car of the year. That makes the Corvair of 1960 a big success. However, by other criteria, the car may be possibly unsafe. In what is by now a fairly well-known evaluation, Ralph Nader focuses on the Corvair in his Unsafe at Any Speed, a book that talks about the numerous shortcomings, particularly in terms of safety of the American car industry, and he uses the Corvair to focus on. His findings, of course, did not go unchallenged by the industry. So which set of criteria is better? The ones that Motor Trend used to designate the car the best of 1960, or the ones that Nader used to declare the car unsafe at any speed? I hope you can see that evaluations may have significant consequences. Economic consequences for the thing being reviewed, certainly, but also consequences that may have to do with the well-being of the people who experience the performance. In this case, the performance of your brand new, shiny car, which may also, sadly, be a death trap. Now, a lot of evaluations of products these days are written by you and people like you and me on sites like Amazon or Rotten Tomatoes. We even see people reviewing the reviews. The "was this helpful to you" question. In this case, we're seizing the participatory power of the internet to voice a point of view, all the while articulating the criteria by which we arrived at our judgment. That is, if you want your review to be helpful. The "this movie sucked" review might not actually be all that helpful to a person who doesn't already know you and your tastes, and who would probably like to know more about why you arrived at that conclusion. One kind of evaluation that most working people experience on a fairly regular basis is a performance evaluation or review. In the case of this kind of evaluation, a supervisor must look at an employee's performance and compare that performance against the criteria of the job description. Is the employee doing well at the responsibilities and expectations that are, with any luck, clearly articulated for the employee? In this case, the supervisor is in the position of authority and thus is called upon to do the evaluating. You might ask, what about the supervisor's evaluation? Does the employee ever get to weigh in? The answer to this question probably depends on the kind of workplace you're in, but in many cases employees evaluate a supervisor only indirectly, if at all. This just speaks to the question of who can and cannot employ the genre in this situation. An ethical supervisor will try to be fair-minded, look at data points if possible, and weigh the overall performance against what may be incidental or minor shortcomings or infractions. I wanted to show you a few kinds of evaluations that we can see, typical situations or subjects of evaluation. Here is a Google search I did for evaluating web pages, and you can see that there are a number of criteria for doing these kinds of evaluations. It's also true that for nonprofit or government programs, and even programs in for-profit institutions, there are often evaluations done of the program, how successful it is or not. And there, again, you need to identify the criteria for evaluating the program. This Google search shows some of the results for the kinds of program evaluations people do in the world. Now, sometimes, just like the proposal genre, the evaluation genre gets put to use by people who aren't necessarily in a position of authority. They claim citizens' authority to evaluate elected officials or public institutions by naming criteria and then showing how those officials or institutions do or don't measure up. Here's a little report on the voting participation done by Rock the Vote. And what this organization did was develop a scorecard with a list of criteria for how to measure whether various states are doing a good job or not at encouraging voter participation. So for instance, you can see that one criterion would be whether voters are registered automatically, say, but with a driver's license, whether their registration is permanent and portable, whether they can register the same day as an election, whether they can register online, and so forth. So every state would be measured up against these criteria, and then an overall score would be awarded based on those criteria, and that would allow then citizens to look and see how well their states are doing, and this could be then an opportunity for activism. So what we'd like to encourage you to do is to look at your topic and think of, in your research, identify an organization, an institution, or a program that perhaps could be evaluated as a way of showing something important about your topic, how well your issue is being addressed by an institution who maybe has responsibility to address it. We hope that by looking at your topic and the various places where your topic is taken up in the broader society, you'll be able to find an opportunity for doing an evaluation that might actually add significant opportunities for action for those who read your work.